Hi, welcome to the Ambient iPad. Let's make some music. This is Jam 60, and I'm going to use a couple of sounds from the Chamberlin, the piano, and 3 violins. So I'll give a little background on the Chamberlin versus the Mellotron. But first, kind of the standard signal chain announcement, which is the Mellotron M4000D Mini. Its master mono analog output goes into a Focusrite Scarlett 18i8 interface, which communicates back and forth with an iPad Pro through a USB-C hub that also lets me power the iPad Pro at the same time. We're using a real straightforward setup today. I've been using MixBox as a multi-effects for the Mellotron, and we'll use a couple effects in the settings that I have here that I haven't really leveraged before, particularly a digital delay. I typically use the tape delay. I'll also bring in some drums. This is a little bit of a composed piece, but I'll get into that. First, quickly, the Chamberlin is the precursor to the Mellotron. It was invented and introduced into the United States in the 1950s by Harry Chamberlin. In the early 60s, Harry's sales rep took a couple over to England, acted like he made them, and got a company to help build him new ones, and that was what the Mellotron was. Eventually, Harry discovered that that was stolen, and it was the Mellotron, so they worked it out legally, and Harry would get licensing from the Mellotron company, and also the Mellotron ended up using a lot of the Chamberlin tapes. So that was also another way that Harry made money off the Mellotron. That kind of went through the 60s, where you could only get the Chamberlin in the United States and you could only get the Mellotron in England, and that started to change in the 70s. But that's a quick history lesson if you want to go more in depth, and there's a lot of info out there. Just do a search on the Chamberlin and the Mellotron. It'll keep you busy for a while. So we're going to use a couple of sounds from the Chamberlin 500. I believe that's where these sounds come from, which was introduced in the early 60s. There were not a lot of models made. Actually, that was the model that the sales rep had took with him over to England. So let's sample the sounds first, just using the compression. Here's the piano. And now the 3 violins. A little dissonance there. Let's let me just compare the Mark II 3 violins to the Chamberlin one, and you can hear how similar that they sound. So first, here's the Chamberlin, and then I'll do the Mark II, and then I'll go back to the Chamberlin. Here we go. So a little bit of a difference. I think the Chamberlin typically sounds a little better. In many cases, the Mellotron tapes are at least 1, if not 2 generations removed from those master tapes. Let's go back to the Music Master Chamberlin piano. And where are we here? Oh, there we go, piano. Now I'm going to layer these. So here's I'll just do this in one fell swoop. Here's the piano and 3 violins on the Chamberlin layer, just with the compression, and then I'll add in the digital reverb, the digital delay, and the plate reverb. So that's our basic sound. The thing that I'm playing here, that's a piece that I'm going to do for the jam. It's really a composed piece. I was going through a bunch of old recordings and I found some things that I was supposed to use for a collaboration that never happened, and I'd reused a lot of ideas from that project, but this kind of piece was just sitting there, so I was like, oh, I think that might sound good on the Mellotron. And, you know, classic kind of piano string layer. The only other thing I do want to do here, though, is I do want to add in some drums, and I'm going to use something I haven't used before. It's called Pure Acid. It's essentially a bass line and drum machine to do electronic music with. It's actually really cool. We're just going to use the drums. I have some patches some drum sets and patterns I've created. Funnily enough, I did create some for this piece, and then I was creating some for another piece, and I think that sounds better, so I'm not going to use Blank Forest is the name of the piece I'm going to do, but I'm going to use these other drums. So this is what they sound like, and then I'll bring everything in so you can hear. So that's essentially it. The drums might be a little too loud, but I'll work on that. Just for variety's sake, I'm going to just do a different camera angle for the jam, and then I'll come back. So that was more of a composed piece, Blank Forest, rather than a jam, but I like to do both. And it was an old piece I haven't done in years, so it was kind of nice to resurrect that, particularly with the drums and the combination of the drums and the Mellotron/Chamberlin. So I use strictly Chamberlin sounds and explained the history earlier in this video. To me, the Chamberlin, if you're comparing one sound against another, to me the Chamberlin ones always sound just a little bit better. There's a number of reasons for that. I believe Chamberlin used much better equipment and studios to record the tapes. And also Mellotron licensed a number of those tapes, so they would have been generations removed from the master tapes, which is why sometimes you hear a different sound quality between them. But it's fun to kind of mix and match, and I'll do that in a future video. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and good luck with your own music.